Did you know that over 1.5 million Canadian households are now considered at risk of losing their homes? And that number is expected to rise sharply in 2025. Behind the headlines, a silent housing crisis is unfolding. New federal and provincial laws are being passed that could make it harder to rent, more expensive to own, and nearly impossible to keep your home if you're not prepared. From surprise taxes on your empty guest room to zoning changes that could block you from selling or renovating, the rules are shifting fast. And if you're not paying attention, you might wake up one day to find your home isn't really yours anymore. This isn't just about politics, it's about survival. Which laws are coming for your neighborhood next? Stay with us, because in this video, we'll uncover 10 shocking laws in 2025 that could force millions of Canadians out of their homes. Number 10. Carbon tax-related building code changes. What if we told you that your home's walls, windows, and even furnace could soon become legally outdated, and fixing them might cost you tens of thousands of dollars? Sounds like science fiction, right? But it's very real, and it's coming fast. In 2025, Canada's push to meet net zero climate targets is leading to a wave of building code changes tied directly to carbon tax policy. These new standards are designed to reduce emissions from homes, especially older ones. That means mandatory energy efficiency upgrades like better insulation, high-efficiency heat pumps, triple-pane windows, and smart thermostats. But here's the catch. For many homeowners, these upgrades aren't just expensive, they're non-negotiable. In some provinces, you may not be able to sell, rent, or even insure your home unless it meets the updated environmental codes. And in the case of large renovations or property transfers, you could be forced to comply. Whether you can afford it or not, a report by the Canadian Climate Institute warns that these regulations, while important for the environment, may disproportionately impact low-income families and seniors, who simply don't have the savings to retrofit their homes. So what can you do? Start by checking your province's retrofit rebate programs. Some offer government grants up to $10,000. Also, speak to a licensed home energy advisor to find out if your house is at risk under the new codes. If you're a homeowner or planning to buy, these changes could reshape your financial future. Have you heard of these building code updates in your area? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like this video if you're learning something new. Subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this list. The next one might hit even closer to home. Number 9. Short-term rental bans. Imagine buying a condo or a second property with the idea of renting it out on Airbnb, only to find out that overnight your entire business model is illegal. That's the reality facing thousands of Canadians in 2025. As more cities roll out aggressive short-term rental bans and restrictions in an effort to fight the housing crisis, in cities like Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, and Halifax, new laws are now prohibiting short-term rentals in all properties that are not the host's principal residence. That means if you own a second home or an investment condo, you can no longer legally rent it out on platforms like Airbnb or VRBO, even for just a weekend. And it doesn't stop there. Municipalities are also introducing strict licensing systems, heavy fines of up to $10,000, and enhanced enforcement tools to track and penalize illegal listings. Some provinces are even requiring short-term rental platforms to report host data directly to the government, making it nearly impossible to operate under the radar. These new crackdowns are being driven by growing public pressure to free up long-term housing stock in tight markets. Cities argue that homes should be lived in, not treated like hotels. But for property owners who rely on short-term income to pay their mortgages, this shift can be financially devastating. Even more concerning, some experts warn that these bans could lead to a wave of forced sales, particularly among small-scale landlords who bought at high prices and now can't cover their costs. And with stricter mortgage rules on the horizon, finding a backup plan isn't easy if your province hasn't introduced these laws yet. Don't assume it won't. Similar legislation is under review in nearly every major urban center, and the dominoes are already falling. Number 8. Zoning overhauls for 15-minute cities. The idea sounds harmless, even helpful. What if everything you needed, was just 15 minutes away. Schools, grocery stores, parks, jobs, doctors, all within walking or biking distance. That's the vision behind the 15-minute city model, a concept being rapidly adopted in Canadian urban planning policies. But in 2025, this well-meaning urban redesign is triggering a fierce backlash. And for good reason, to make this vision a reality. Cities are rolling out zoning overhauls that could dramatically reshape entire neighborhoods. Single-family lots are being rezoned for multi-unit buildings. Parking spaces are being eliminated to make room for bike lanes. And large portions of suburban areas are being reclassified for mixed-use development, whether residents agree with it or not. In cities like Edmonton, Calgary, and parts of Ontario, these changes are being passed with minimal public input, leaving many homeowners feeling blindsided. Some fear that once quiet residential areas could be overtaken by mid-rise apartment blocks, retail chains, or government-funded housing projects, changing the character and value of their neighborhoods. Forever critics argue that this approach ignores the realities of families, seniors and workers who rely on vehicles and space. Others worry that zoning changes may give cities the power to limit car use, restrict travel between districts, or even penalize certain behaviors under the guise of environmental protection. Proponents say the plan is about sustainability, walkability, and stronger communities. But opponents see something different, a form of top-down social engineering that's forcing people to live a certain way, regardless of their needs or preferences. Whether you support or oppose the 15-minute city model, one thing is clear: these zoning laws are already being written into city bylaws. And if you own property in an affected area, your rights and your lifestyle could be on the line. Number 7. CMHC mortgage rule updates for many Canadians. The only way to buy a home is through a higher ratio mortgage. Often backed by the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, CMHC, but in 2025, updated CMHC rules could make that dream much harder to achieve and even harder to hold on to. The new regulations are aimed at tightening mortgage eligibility, especially for first-time buyers and households with variable or unstable income. Under the revised rules, applicants must now meet higher minimum credit scores, lower debt-to-income ratios, and stricter stress testing thresholds. In short, if your finances aren't nearly perfect, you might not qualify at all, even for a modest home. What's more alarming is how these changes affect existing homeowners. Many who bought in 2020 to 2022 during the height of low-interest borrowing are now facing mortgage renewals at nearly double their original rates. And under CMHC's updated policies, refinancing isn't as easy as it once was. If your income hasn't increased significantly, or your home equity has dropped due to falling market values, you could be denied refinancing altogether, even if you've never missed a payment. This has sparked growing concern among economists and policy advocates, who warn of a coming wave of mortgage prisoners, homeowners trapped in high-rate terms with no ability to switch lenders or restructure their loans. Even more troubling, some are predicting a rise in forced sales or foreclosures, especially among younger families and new immigrants who entered the market on thin margins. The intention behind these updates is to reduce systemic risk and prevent another housing bubble. But for thousands of Canadians, the result might be the exact opposite: financial instability, rising debt, and the very real threat of losing their homes, not because they were reckless, but because the rules changed while they were still playing the game. Number 6. Quebec's anti-eviction bill in response to a growing wave of evictions disguised as renovations. The Quebec government has introduced one of the most aggressive housing protection laws in the country, the anti-eviction bill. While its goal is to protect tenants from being unfairly displaced, critics say it could have major ripple effects on the housing market, especially for small landlords and aging rental stock. The bill, passed in 2025, gives tenants unprecedented legal power to challenge eviction notices related to renovations. Landlords are now required to prove the necessity of the work, obtain permits, and in many cases, offer the tenant the right to return after renovations at the same rent. If landlords can't meet these conditions, eviction is blocked. This sounds like a win for renters, and in many ways it is. Re-evictions have been a growing problem, with some landlords using minor upgrades as an excuse to push tenants out, raise rents, and bring in higher-paying occupants. But for landlords with older properties, the law could be a game-changer, and not in a good way. Many small-scale property owners now face the tough choice of paying out of pocket for expensive repairs while maintaining outdated rent levels, or selling their buildings altogether. Some fear the bill will lead to a decline in rental housing maintenance. As landlords avoid upgrades to sidestep the legal minefield, others warn that this could shrink the supply of rental units in the long term. As investors pull out of the rental market altogether, in a province already struggling with housing shortages, the unintended consequence may be a tighter market and even higher demand. The very thing the law was trying to prevent. For now, Quebec tenants have more security than ever, but the long-term impact on property owners, housing supply, and affordability is still uncertain and potentially far-reaching. Number 5. Vacancy tax adjustments. In cities where housing demand far outpaces supply, empty homes have become a political target, and in 2025 the pressure is intensifying. Both Vancouver and Toronto have significantly increased their vacancy tax rates, and other municipalities across Canada are now following suit. The message is clear: if you're not living in it or renting it, you'll be paying for it. Originally introduced as a way to discourage property speculation and foreign ownership, vacancy taxes were meant to push owners of empty units to either sell or rent them out. But in 2025, these taxes are being ramped up dramatically. In Vancouver, for example, the taxes jumped from 1% to as high as 5% of a home's assessed value, depending on how long it remains unoccupied. Toronto has implemented similar hikes, with new rules requiring detailed annual declarations and proof of occupancy. These updates don't just hit foreign investors. They're now catching average Canadians, people who own second properties for retirement, family use, or seasonal stays. Even those who temporarily leave their homes for work or medical reasons are finding themselves scrutinized under stricter criteria. The bureaucracy is also growing. Failure to submit proper documentation or missing a filing deadline can result in automatic classification as a vacant property, triggering large fines and retroactive tax bills. Some homeowners are now discovering they owe tens of thousands of dollars simply because they misunderstood the rules or didn't respond in time. Supporters say the tax is working, pushing more units into the rental market, but critics argue that it's punishing regular families and retirees who are being treated like speculators. With more cities considering similar measures, vacancy tax adjustments are quickly becoming one of the most aggressive and controversial housing policies in Canada. Today, number 4, BC's rental-only zoning, Loween, British Columbia. Loween, a sweeping new policy called the rental-only zoning law, is reshaping how neighborhoods function and who gets to control their property. Introduced as part of the province's broader effort to tackle the housing crisis, this law gives municipalities the power to designate entire areas as rental-only zones, meaning properties within them can no longer be sold as condos or used as personal residences unless they remain rental units. The idea is to preserve affordable rental stock in rapidly developing cities like Vancouver, Burnaby, and Victoria, where conversions from rental buildings to high-end condos have pushed many renters out. But for individual property owners and small landlords, this law comes with serious consequences. Under the new rules, strata corporations, the governing bodies for condo buildings, can no longer pass bylaws that restrict or ban rentals. That means if you bought a unit expecting to live in a quiet, owner-occupied building, you may now find it filled with short or long-term tenants you didn't plan for. And if your local municipality zones your area as rent, you may be forced to rent out your unit indefinitely, even if you had other plans like selling, downsizing, or moving in yourself. Critics argue that this is a heavy-handed approach that overrides personal property rights and creates uncertainty for owners who plan their finances around certain assumptions. Some worry this will drive investors away from the housing market entirely, reducing the flow of new rental construction the very supply the province claims it wants to boost. Supporters of the law believe it's a bold step toward protecting renters and preventing gentrification. But for many homeowners, especially those with a single condo or retirement property, BC's rental-only zoning law is a sudden and unexpected shift that could leave them with fewer options and more risk than ever before. Number 3. Ontario's Greenbelt housing law reversal. One of the most controversial policy U-turns in recent memory. The Ontario government has reversed its decision to open up protected Greenbelt lands for housing development, a move that's now causing widespread confusion, financial chaos, and legal headaches for homeowners, developers, and municipalities alike originally. The government had removed protections on thousands of acres within the Greenbelt, a vast stretch of environmentally sensitive land surrounding the Greater Toronto Area. The plan was to allow rapid housing development to meet growing demand. Dozens of projects were launched, land was bought at premium prices, and construction plans were drawn. But after massive public backlash and accusations of political favoritism, the province reinstated the Greenbelt protections in 2025 and canceled the previously approved developments. For developers and property investors, the fallout has been brutal. Land that was purchased for millions, assuming it could be developed, is now essentially frozen. Projects that were mid-design or even mid-construction had been halted, leaving unfinished homes, lost investments, and communities in limbo. Even individual homeowners are feeling the impact. Some who bought in too early phases of these projects are discovering their home contracts are void, or worse, that their deposits may never be returned. Others are watching the value of their pre-construction purchases plummet overnight. Municipalities are also scrambling to adjust infrastructure plans and zoning bylaws, while lawsuits begin piling up from developers claiming financial damages from the policy reversal. While environmentalists have welcomed the decision to protect Ontario's green spaces, critics say the abrupt nature of the reversal has shaken confidence in the province's planning process. And for thousands of Ontarians caught in the middle, whether as buyers, builders, or local residents, the Greenbelt law reversal represents more than just politics. It's a jarring example of how quickly housing dreams can collapse under shifting policy winds. Number 2. Foreign buyer ban extension. In an effort to cool Canada's overheated real estate market, the federal government introduced a 2-year ban on foreign homebuyers in 2023, but in 2025, what was meant to be a temporary measure has now been extended indefinitely, sparking debate across the country and raising serious questions about its long-term impact on property values, ownership rights, and market stability. The original ban targeted non-resident foreign investors, prohibiting them from purchasing residential property in Canada unless they met very narrow exceptions, such as being a refugee, international student, or on a work permit. The idea was to curb speculation, reduce vacant properties, and make housing more accessible to Canadians. But with housing affordability still out of reach for many, the government doubled down by not only extending the ban, but strengthening the penalties for anyone caught circumventing it. Now, individuals and corporations found violating the rules can face fines of up to $100,000. And the government has increased its enforcement capacity to monitor suspicious transactions. Real estate agents, lawyers, and developers are also being held to higher standards of due diligence, with the risk of losing their licenses if found complicit. However, the extension has had unintended consequences. In markets like Vancouver and Toronto, where foreign buyers made up a notable share of luxury and pre-construction purchases, some developers are scaling back new projects due to reduced demand. This could actually tighten overall housing supply in the years ahead, driving prices even higher. Moreover, Canadians living abroad, including expats and dual citizens, are finding themselves shut out of the market, unable to purchase property in their home country unless they meet strict residency requirements. While many support the move as a step toward fairness, others argue that it's a symbolic gesture that does little to address the deeper structural issues behind Canada's housing crisis and may, in the long run, do more harm than good. Number 1. Federal underused housing tax expansion. What started as a narrow tax aimed at foreign property owners has quietly grown into a broad federal policy that now affects thousands of Canadian citizens, many of whom didn't even realize they were on the hook. In 2025, the federal Underused Housing Tax (EHT) has been significantly expanded, and it's catching more property owners in its net than ever before. Initially introduced in 2022, the UHT was designed to discourage foreign investors from parking money in vacant Canadian homes. It imposed a 1% annual tax on the value of residential properties deemed underused. However, new changes in 2025 have expanded the definition of affected owners, and now even private Canadian corporations, trustees, and certain joint ownership structures are being flagged. That means if your property is owned through a holding company, family trust, or co-owned with a non-resident relative, you may now be subject to the UHT, even if the home is fully occupied. To make matters worse, the filing requirements have become more complex, and failing to submit the proper paperwork can trigger automatic penalties of $5,000 to $10,000 per property, regardless of whether any tax is actually owed. Many small landlords and family property owners are finding out the hard way, often through unexpected audit letters or CRA notices. Accountants are reporting a surge in confusion as the filing guidelines are dense, and exemptions aren't always clear-cut. The federal government claims the expansion is necessary to ensure fairness and boost housing availability. But critics argue that the policy now targets ordinary Canadians, not just wealthy foreign speculators. For many, it feels like a tax grab disguised as housing reform, and one that could make owning even a modest second property more costly, complicated, and legally risky than ever before. These 10 laws aren't just headlines. They're real changes that could directly impact your home, your finances, and your future. Staying informed is no longer optional. It's essential. If this video opened your eyes, make sure to hit that like button. Subscribe for more clear breakdowns of policies that affect everyday Canadians. And drop a comment below. Which law worries you the most? Your insight could help someone else. And if you want to stay one step ahead, don't miss our next video on how to legally reduce your property taxes in 2025, coming up next.